everybody. I'm Marilyn, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs, and I'm joined today by Tala, who you all know is, as she likes to call herself, centaur number one. Although I try to remind her that I'm theoretically number one and she's number two, but that's a debate for another day. So you can guess from the title of today's session that we are still here to talk about the Cosmic Conference, but today in a very different way.
Yeah.
You know, as we were thinking about this conference when we were starting it and coming up with the concept, and I'll talk a little bit more about like why we chose to do it the way that we did, why we chose the theme that we did, and so on. We chose to actually take on something that was bolder and bigger than we had ever done before. And we chose to do it in a very public way and to learn about it in a very public way because we weren't quite sure if it was going to work out or not. So even from the very beginning, we started posting our cosmic diaries where we're kind of explaining our thought process and giving you a view into the BTS, which I learned is not just a Korean band, but also a behind the scenes. But because I think that the idea of learning in public is something that has become very important to us at Cosmic Centaurs. It's something that terrifies every single one of us because we're all like, insecure overachievers. And I think we all want to do the best work of our lives. But we've learned over the last 2.5 years that actually it's the only way to really learn and to really try things out and to experiment. And so we started this way, we will end this way. We are here to reflect publicly and openly about the things that we think went really well, but also the things that we think just crashed and burned.
Yep.
All right. So just a little bit of like why we did the conference the way we did it. So those of you who attended it, it was two major decisions. The first decision was what is our theme going to be? And the second decision was what is our format going to be? And, as we were brainstorming this back in May, I went to a couple conferences and they were, I have to say, boring. They were all panels. There was no debate. People were repeating things that they were saying in their LinkedIn feed. Like I felt like if I'm going to get on a plane and go somewhere, or even just take an hour out of my day to be with others, I don't want to read or hear the same thing that I'm hearing all day long. I wish that there had been a little bit more debate and discussion and disagreement, or even just some unique points of views. And as a consequence, it led me to two decisions that, I'm like, okay, gang, here's what we're going to do. First of all, we are not going to talk about remote versus not, because that's a debate that's incredibly tactical, almost unimportant in this, in the sense that that's not where you want to start. And that's not the conversation you want to be having with your employees, or the kind of thinking you want to be having as a leader. Rather, you want to be thinking about what is our business goal? How can we create an organization that can deliver on that goal? And how can we create the best employee experience so our people can do the best work of their lives, right? And so that's why we chose to step away from, the ongoing, very black and white discussion. And as we were also thinking about the format and the length, I was like, listen, there's only one reason that conferences are 2 day long, because people travel. And if they don't, then they don't need to be. And so I posited to my team that maybe that was a constraint we could do without. We ended up with a 3.5 week extravaganza. I think we did 16 lives. We did an event. It was every day. It was relentless, exhausting at times, but also super rewarding, and we learned a lot.
Wow.
So that's my intro for you folks. If you have some bits and peaks you want to share with us about what you loved or didn't love about the conference, we're all ears. But Tala and I are going to break it down. And so Tala, I gave you guys this brief.
Yeah.
We did it. Here we are. What do you think? In retrospect, tell me about what you think about the theme and tell me about what you think about the format.
The theme worked really well for a number of reasons. I think, like you said, the question wasn't whether are we remote or are we hybrid or are we flexible. We had those conversations in response to, a unique moment in history where everybody was navigating that. But it was a higher level conversation. And it was about, well, what does it mean to come to work and how do we design the work and the work experience? And, we looked at the employee experience, which is a really special and specific part of the work that we do in helping leaders redesign and kind of rethink it. So the theme worked. Why did it work? We had multiple touch points. We weren't limited to a certain topic. We had so much that we could cover, and that was something really interesting. We talked about intranets. We talked about imprintable moments. We talked about culture. We talked about processes. We talked about offsites. it was liberating. It was liberating to have a broad theme that we could kind of then say, there's not one specific way. There's not one specific thing. We're not married to it. And it allowed us to also speak to our guests who were incredible and then kind of brainstorm and riff off that. Be like, we think we want to talk about this. And they'd be like, well, how about instead we talk about that? And it was a beautiful moment in which we could collaborate with the people who helped bring this to life. So theme loved. Also, it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit on that too. I think having a theme, as you say, allows you to get creative in every which way, right? The format, the content. We also did where we found that like maybe the conversation we'd had with the speaker went one way. We were like, but we wish we had still spoken about that. Didn't find a speaker to do it. No problem. We can write about it. Our speaker isn't available at the time where we want them to be. No worries. We could do an asynchronous thing. And I think because we had a theme, but then everything else was freedom, we were able to experiment quite a bit. That was quite a lot at times. So, when we first started our team retrospective, the first thing y'all said, you're like, we are never doing 3.5 weeks again. Tell us more.
So I have a question for you. What's the difference between like a conference sprint, and maybe you can explain to the people how, in fact, going from 2 days to 3 weeks was a sprint and not a marathon?
Yeah. I mean, it's a sprint because we were obviously referring, not so obviously referring to agile sprints, in the sense that when you work in agile methodologies and Scrum in particular, and you do a sprint, what you're saying is we have like this really big thing that we're trying to build. And I think in this case, it refers to the employee experience, right? Like the employee experience is a very complex, big topic. And as you rightly, pointed out, it covers a lot of touch points, which in Scrum terms you might call epics. Not that they are epic, but they're epics because they're it's like a Greek epic. It's not a chapter. It's not a short story. And so when you do a sprint, you're saying like, okay, if I look at this and I try to cover it all, I'm going to faint. But if I just take some of it and say, all right, what's the minimum that I can do to kind of progress on this? So instead of trying to say, I want to cover everything there is to say about office redesigns and everything there is to say about internal comms, and no, but let's just like do something incremental. Like, let's start the discussion. Let's add, 2 or 3 insights that will allow people to think about a topic. And so that in that sense, it was a sprint because it was a short period of time where we were trying to really like actually tackle a massive product, so to speak, again, to bring in that metaphor. But instead of like being overambitious with like trying to go into the specifics of every little topic, we said, let's do an MVP. Like, what's the minimum viable product of discussing all of these touch points? And then at the end of a sprint, you always do a retrospective. Here we are. We also did one as a team where you say like, all right, gang, like, did this work? What have we completed? What could we do better next time? Where do we feel like we are with this? And so, I want to like, in a retrospective, like everybody kind of is allowed to express their opinion about things that like we should stop, start, or continue doing, or things that went well and things that didn't. We had a discussion about the 3.5 week thing.
Yeah, we did.
Tell me.
One thing that we found with 3.5 weeks was that some of the team members were like, it's a lot. And Marilyn challenged us. She's like, was it really? And that's her job as a leader, is to push us. And we were like, and in the sense that we've done this quite a bit, we've codified it. We're efficient, which is great. So it made some things easier. But the format, left a few people kind of wondering, like, where do we go from here? And the length was like, how long, what's the perfect sweet spot? Sweet enough that we have time to explore things in detail, time to experiment, time to do different sessions, but also where do we cap it? To kind of say like, all right, we don't want filler content. That's not what we want. We want everything to be very meaningful and everything to be very deliberate, which in our case it was. But you can kind of see how when things get longer, you're just trying to rush to fill that time. And so that's one thing that we talked about. But overall, I think what we decided on was it's definitely can't be 2 days. 3.5 weeks might be too long, but maybe 10 to 12 days is the perfect amount of time. What do you think about that, Marilyn?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say like, listen, I'm part of, why people liked our Cosmic Diaries is like, if you're an event planner or you're a marketeer and you're thinking about like, okay, these people just tried something new. Is this for us or not? Right. And that's also why we share this in public, because other people might have something to learn or something to contribute. If I look at what the objective was, it was to explore a theme in a way that is, a little bit not, more than superficial. So give ourselves time to do that. We wanted to look at it from a myriad of points of view, and we did. And I don't think there was any session that was redundant with the other. Like, they all had so many different things to contribute. But also it was about establishing, the Cosmic Conference as a thought leadership conference on the topic. And it's a joke, but you guys, I always say it, like, I tell you guys, if people aren't sick and tired of seeing us in their feed, we're not doing enough. And I feel like this time we really nailed it. Went all the way, especially because LinkedIn sends a notification, when we go live, which is different than when we post, where it only shows it to a few people. And in that sense, the feedback I got is now people associate us and the conference with this topic in a way that we had never done before. So the relentlessness of our presence, of the diversity of the topics that we covered within, the theme of the conference, and we can talk about it in a minute, the quality of the guests and their interventions just allowed us to truly position this conference where we want it to be, right? Which is a place to come and think and reflect and be inspired in order to do better by your people moving forward. So for me, I was like, really, guys, I think it was fine. And then I remember saying, did any of you stay till the office till 10:30? And you're like, should we have? And I think it's always interesting also to have this discussion, to me in public, because it's well, as a leader, I need to push you guys. And I didn't feel like anyone broke, and then you and Karma were like, yeah, but we were tired. I was like,
we don't need to reach the breaking point. But, and the pushing is great. And actually, what I do want to say is I fully agree with you. We were able to establish ourselves to a topic that's, not only on the mind of leaders, but very close to the work that we do. And actually, the length allowed our guests to we were able to really be very flexible with our guests. That's what the format allowed for. Someone was like, I can't make that day and time. We'd be like, no problem. When does it work during that week? We had guests from Australia. We had guests from North America, even on the West Coast of the United States, which is about a 12-hour time difference. And because we had a long duration of time, we could fit those sessions in, which meant that the content was amazing because we weren't bound by time. We could go off the time of our guests. And I think it's a good segue to start to talk about them, because they really helped to shape the conference and how just insightful it was, because they really brought it to the table.
Yeah, I think our guests really brought their, A game. First of all, I really think it's always interesting to have that diversity of perspectives from people like us who are consultants to practitioners, managers, academics, CEOs or leaders within their organizations, and coaches and so on. And it just allows us to see how different people approach this topic and broach it, and what their secret sauce is, and what they've been saying, and what they're preaching. And again, I didn't always agree with everything the guest said, but that was exactly the point, right? Which was that we have diverging perspectives. We are sitting here designing the future of work together, and for sure there will not be a consensus, because for sure we're going to disagree on things. In one prep session, Jillian and I had a debate about the 4-day work week, or John and I discussed the importance of culture and history, despite him defending distributed work. There was a lot of things we agreed on, but a lot of things we didn't, and that's what I loved. Everybody brought their perspective, and everybody had something that they truly believed in, and we created space for that, for them to just not have to agree with us in order to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And also we weren't married to a specific format when it came to their sessions. So we had a lot of different ones, and that really helped the guests also present their insights in a way that felt natural and normal to them, right? We had Chase, who came and did a presentation. That's one example. We also had Jonathan Yao come in and run a live coaching session, which was very different and super cool, And so we had one panel, and that was really nice. We had two diverging perspectives on the internet, someone more from a tech background, someone focused on employee engagement, Jenny and Adam respectively. And just that for me really stood out, because then that meant you didn't know what to expect. And that surprise element made it fun, and having that diversity allowed the guests to be experimental, it allowed us to be experimental. And I don't think we could have done that if it was a very rigid, we have 2 days, we have to pack in 8 sessions, and then can you be on a panel? Like, it wasn't like that. Whereas in years past, it's okay. It was. And that worked for us at that time. But I really
Yeah.
love that about this year. I think that that worked really well. And I can't wait to do more of that on a bigger scale.
So we've talked a lot about things that we think worked. And
Yeah,
again, just a second to say a huge thank you to our
of
speakers
course. Yeah.
who brought their A game and were willing to be game, like
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
try things out with us. Some things didn't work. One thing I'll talk about is, we used this new tool
Mhm.
this time around because it had new capabilities. Like, for example, it allowed us to share the same stream to multiple channels on LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
the tool we're using right now, which is, by the way, guys, if you want to know, is the one I recommend. It's called StreamYard. It's very simple, it's very basic, but it does the job and it never fails.
Yep.
And this year we tried another tool which has a lot of like additional features, and that's why we tried it out. But it also failed us at moments where it really was critical that it doesn't. We discovered later that every time one of our speakers would share a presentation, things would fall apart.
Mhm.
So for some reason, the streaming platform wasn't able to take that on. And also, what we thought was the killer feature, which is our ability to share across multiple channels. So, for example,
Mhm.
Tala and I and the guest and whatever, and Cosmic Centers would all be streaming at the same time.
Yeah.
Turned out to be really terrible from a user
Yeah.
experience point of view. Like, our audience was like, you guys are saying there's a question, but I don't see it. Where's it coming from? Like,
Yeah.
actually, they really did not appreciate that experience.
Yeah. Technology, it's always a tough one, and figuring that out. Similarly, I want to say, like, at our live event, which is something we haven't talked too much about, something we could have done better, and we know for next year, is to just make sure that the sound and is where it needs to be. We had a lot of guests sitting at the back of the room that were like, maybe didn't hear it, and we love the space and we love it all, but it's definitely a learning. Tech always has challenges, and I feel like that's kind of where the majority of event planning can be like quite meticulous, and you have to be very careful with it all. So I would definitely agree that I don't think that worked in our favor. And there's one thing I wish we did more that we didn't do, and actually it's something we needed to talk more about, which was the strategic piece of EX. And for that, we should have flipped the mic on you. We didn't do that. We as your team know that you have very clear opinions about it, and we do a lot of work around it. We have a lot of insights to share, and it's something we could have done, is to really kind of talk about how we need to align EX to business strategy and deliver on it. But that's not to say that we won't talk about it. So we
Webinar coming
guys can
soon near
stay
you.
tuned. Exactly. Consider this your teaser announcement.
Yes, because the last thing I want people to think is that employee experience is about like showering employees with money or gifts. Like that
Right.
is, and that's, by the way, not what employees want either. And
No.
we can do a whole session. We'll talk about Maslow's pyramid and how you can translate it to the employee experience and what that
Yeah.
means. But people want to contribute meaningful work that has impact.
Yeah.
If there's also a free lunch in the process, they won't be sad about it. But people always equate this with like just giving away stuff to employees, and that's really
Yeah.
not what the employee experience is about. In fact, most of the employee experience is about doing the work, not the stuff around it. It's about how the work is structured. When we talk to leaders, when we talk to team members, what do they complain about? My role isn't clear. I don't know how to collaborate with the teams. I feel like there's redundance in the in the projects. I don't know who's responsible for things. Like, this is the stuff that gets in the way. And not like, they don't say like, oh, my cousin, it works with this other company that has a ping pong table. No one does that,
Yeah.
So it's very, very important to listen to what employees actually need and not like make this assumption that this is about giving them gifts.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you about, which is it came out, while the conference was running, you were recently published in Harvard Business Review, talking about how leaders can use tools from CX to listen to their employees and design a better EX or employee experience.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about, how they can design something that's truly employee centric versus beanbags, video games, free lunch.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, shout out to Mark Mortensen for being, the door opener in this one and suggesting that we write this article together. The idea there is, like, that's another thing we preach quite a bit. Both you and me, Marie, like a lot of us come from marketing. In fact, we come from PR, we come from customer-centric practices.
Mhm.
And when people say like, when we look inside companies and we see like they have these, what we call one size fits none policies, like
Yeah.
everybody in the office Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Well, that may not work for everybody, and that's really dumb,
Yeah.
Um, or even like I'm a huge critic of Wellness Week. Like I totally get how like wonderful the sentiment is behind it, but if you're someone that's socially isolated and your only form of human connection is through work, and now I'm telling you you're going to be alone and you can't send emails to your colleagues and you can't call them, I'm just like, like maybe not. So
Yeah.
I'm a true believer in flexibility across the board. We designed this conference to be flexible. I think work should be flexible,
Yeah.
and agile. And so this article that we wrote is about, it's also really hard to collect data from employees. Like it's hard to say like, well, what do these people actually want? When HR professionals or leaders look at this, they're like, well, this sounds daunting. So I'm going to put in my best intentions, but oftentimes it ends up being like a one size fits none. And so Mark and I wrote this article about how we practice collecting data in very efficient ways by leveraging tools that we've all learned to use in design thinking and in customer centricity, and just flipping them and using them in order to understand the employee requirements and needs before we make decisions about what the office should look like, what policy we should put in place, what benefits people want. Like I remember when both of us were at Amar, Amar used to pay for schooling, right?
Yeah.
That was benefits. And you would look at people and be like, Tayyip, you have 3 kids and you're costing this company an extra, I don't know, $30,000 a year. And for no reason other than I don't have children, I don't get anything.
A benefit like
Right?
that. Yeah.
At the time. So like if we're measuring like my value to the organization, the fact that I don't have children is punishing. Like, how does that make sense? Right? So
Yeah. No, of course.
the idea is to kind of learn what people want, understand that they're different from each other, and try to use that data to make better decisions about what we're putting in place. And the article came out at the same time. And actually, Mark and I were meant to do a session during the conference about this, but we couldn't because of personal circumstances. But we will do one. So stay tuned. That's the other one we'll be doing.
I was going to say, I was even more reason to flip the mics. Let's get Mark in. Let's talk about this. Absolutely. I think, like you said, it's just ask. You said in your opening keynote, like do one thing every day. And if the one thing that you do today is ask your employees, like, what can we do better? Then that's a great starting point. In fact, that's a huge milestone, and a lot of the different guests said that in different ways, shape, or form, like when we were talking about flexibility at work, it was like, well, have you asked them what kind of work model do they want? Or have you asked them, can they work from home? That's something, we talked about with Imad. It was like some of the people could not work from home. And so how could we assume that they would? So definitely that stood out to me. I'd love to kind of now talk about, we always talk about the magic of teamwork and how beautiful it is when people come together. And I think our team, considering, everything that happened this summer, did an incredible job at bringing this to life. And shout out especially to Karma. She is our whiz behind the scenes. She brought so much of the conference to life. But what did you observe about our team? And you kind of use this term coming of age. Tell us a little bit more about it. Tell people what went on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a team of 6, 3, I'm going to call it like more senior or with more years behind them in terms of our work experience. Yeah. And then 3 others who I believe for all of them, this was their first job.
Yeah.
And so they've been with us, for a little over a year for most, and then Daniela for a year. Mm-hmm. They came to us with whatever skills, university taught them. And we really came together as a team over, before you and I went off on maternity leave to be like, here are the 17 skills you're going to have to learn. When I say this to people, they're like, are you guys nuts? Like, if you remember, Tala, you remember because you like created it and orchestrated it, of course. We had like weekly sessions. I would show up. We called it the boot camp.
Boot camp.
And the magical thing at the end of that boot camp, where every week we would put together a presentation and come and be like, here's writing skills, presentation skills, how to build a strategy, whatever, is that the team just like emerged, right? And everybody also found their place and their strengths and the way that they can contribute in a meaningful way. And as we were doing this conference, like, someone said to me as a debrief to the conference, they're like, you guys are 6 people, but you operate like you're a massive media group. Yeah. The amount of like, not just the content, but the quality of it.
Absolutely.
And the reason we're able to do that is because every single person in this team, first of all, brings their best and they're willing to learn. And they've grown, myself, yourself included, tremendously over the
Yeah.
last year. But also, I think that we prioritize, like, we know how to do teamwork really well.
We
So
do.
we know when to collaborate, we know when not to. We know when to be like, the right person for this task is Marie. The right person for this one is Maya, because we know each other's strengths really well as well.
Yeah.
You know, we know when not to give Marilyn a task. Like, don't ask Marilyn to write a long form article on her own because it will take her 9 months, you know? Um, so, so I think that our ability to do that meant that we did this like massive endeavor without breaking a sweat, so
Yeah.
to speak. You know, like we
Yeah.
discussed, you know, how much should we be tired, but we didn't really. I mean, the day before an in-person event, I've never seen this. The day before our in-person event, everybody left by 5:30. Everything was done. The bags, the process, who's going to do what, task distribution, who arrives at what time, what are they accountable for, what are they not supposed to do because they're going to like mess it up. 5:30, everybody was gone. This, I've never seen this in my life. And you shared something with us, you know, an Instagram post, which I love, and so I'm going to steal it, which is that being easy to work with is a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And people reflected it to us, by the way. Somebody told me about the in-person event. They were like, you guys didn't look stressed. It's like, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, like you said, we do teamwork really well. And to kind of say that we delegate tasks that people we know can get done really quickly. I also want to say we also push everybody to get involved in things that might feel a little bit out of their comfort zone because these are moments for growth. Because in the next conference, we want everybody, for example, to write an article about something like that. You know, even some people might have writer's block and be like, I cannot bring myself to write it. But that's how we also up and reskill ourselves. And I think that's a really unique part of what brings us together is that we do what we do really well and we share what we don't and we help, you know, upskill and get people into different places. I think that's one thing that stood out to me. I also want to say it was the first time our team had a summit. We all came together. Everybody came to the in-person event. We met. I was the only person who hadn't met everybody, but for me that really stood out because the in-person event was a huge moment for us. We had run these virtually, you know, we started in the pandemic, we lived in screens, you know, we were in the metaverse for all anybody knew. And we came together in person and we saw our community come to life and we saw our team engage with our community. You know, people had been on Zoom calls, they said hello to each other, we hugged people, you know, we learned all of these things and it was a really nice moment for our community and also for our team because like you said, it was really that, it shifted perspectives a little bit, you know, it helped to see things from a different light. We learned more about each other being together. You know, even I was going to say, we had our hair done by 5 p.m. for the next day.
That's true. Including getting our hair done.
Including getting our hair done. Like we dotted our I's and crossed our T's before 5:30 and we all had a good night's rest, you know?
Totally. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, now you're making me think of something. It's a little bit off track, but not. You know, I'll link it because also in the spirit of sharing things that didn't go as well.
yeah.
You know, I think for as beautiful and cohesive and like energy filled as the offline event was, and everybody who went to it, you know, reflect because we called every single person and asked them, like, gave us really amazing feedback. What happened with the online piece though is because I think it's because of a lot of reasons. First of all is when we did our first 2 conferences, there were in the first one everybody was on lockdown. In the second one, some people were still on lockdown. They're still at home doing nothing, in the sense that they weren't like off to a meeting at the office, blah blah blah. Now the consequence of that is that virtual event attendance drops dramatically. Even more so when, you know, every day our session was at a different time. Like there was no predictability for people. I mean, of course you could go, if you were very diligent, you would go on the website, sign up, put it in your calendar. But on the whole, like it was hard for people to plan around being at the sessions. And so for sure, like something that we lost, and I don't know that we're going to make it up by doing the same thing, you know, like I really want to sit and reflect about what does now an online event look like where people actually come and are there. Is that our attendance was like whoever happened to be on LinkedIn at the time, you know? And by the way, LinkedIn people, product people, like maybe we're the only people on the planet who do this. If we are, please let us know. We'll go somewhere else. But we set up this event page. We have more than 1,000 attendees subscribed to come, and then we cannot stream to that page, and we can't communicate to these attendees save for like taking their emails and spamming them. And so that was another one which like reduced the online attendance. I mean, we still got like maybe 80 or 100 people, during the live, but it could have been so much more. It's just the platform doesn't accommodate for this. At the same time, it would be so much harder to try and get people to come to another platform, like come to a Zoom link or come to Butter or come to, all the other platforms. So I still feel like there's a product play, like a technology play that's missing in all of this, that would still allow for the serendipity of the social media network. Like, oh, you happen to be on LinkedIn, we happen to be live, join us. But also just creates a good user experience. So still a lot to think about there, honestly. But I just wanted to make sure we're also super transparent about the things that like we don't think went, as well as like the previous years.
Yeah, for sure. You can't mention, I mean, it is a pits and peaks. We got to mention the pits, not just the peaks.
Got to do the pits.
Otherwise you can't learn. And actually we have a question from the audience. It's a nice one. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about running a conference but feels like it's a massive undertaking?
Tala, maybe you'll have a different perspective, but I don't feel like our conference feels to us. I mean, of course we put in I'm sure if we count how many hours we've put into it, I will faint. But it doesn't feel like a massive undertaking because it's going to sound so stupid, but we are disciplined, meaning we start early. Every year that we've done the conference, we wrote down a planning. And so now when we go back to start the conference, we have 110 tasks in an Excel sheet that we know we need to get through. So we've listed them. There's no what should we be doing? Oh my God, I forgot this. What's next? What does a speaker pack? We're not starting from scratch. So we started small, we iterated, we built up, we learned every year, we documented everything. We have a super clear process. We have templates from before, and we know how early we need to start depending on the size of the thing we're trying to do. And I think that's my advice. Start small, iterate, do the MVP, do a conference sprint, to go back full circle now. Start small, learn from it. Every year, learn a little bit more, but also I think every year be a little bit more ambitious.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you said. And there's a few things I also want to add to it. I think one thing for us is what we do before we jump into the planning is we're really clear about what we want our audience to gain. What do we want our audience to feel? What do we want them to leave learning? What type of experience do we want them to have? We are always, user-centric, and, this is no exception. We put this out here, of course, to, for us and to kind of share what we learn, but that's also so that we can help people and so that we can, not hold this knowledge just for us. It's so that people who are thinking about their employee experience or any of the specific touch points can come and learn something. That was our initial kind of thinking. Even in the 2020 edition, it was everyone was working remotely. It was July, and we were let's talk about it. Let's bring people together. Let's talk about how we're adapting to whatever this, period of life is, and how businesses can be agile and responsive and make the most out of it. And so I think being user-centric and having a clear desired outcome for you internally and then also for your audience is one. And I would say don't do it alone. We are a team. Marie put it in the comments, teamwork makes the dream work. And it can feel like a huge undertaking for sure whenever, because on the outside, there's a lot that goes into it. But if you're not alone, you have someone to even just bounce ideas off of, delegate. Like we said before, if your strength is the measurement piece, great. You're involved post-conference. We'll call you when it's done. And if your strength is developing, marketing collateral, we'll talk before. And if you're really into research, you will help us, formulate the topics and data points. So those would be the two things that I'd add is, be clear about your desired outcome and also don't do it alone.
Yeah. And you've just inspired me to kind of build on what you're saying. I read The Art of Gathering during the pandemic, but I also happened to start reading a book called The Power of Moment in the middle of us planning the conference.
Yeah.
And to your point about saying how do you want people to feel? Oftentimes people are this is what we want to say.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of here's how we want people to feel. This is what we want them to walk away with.
Yeah.
And I think when we planned our in-person event, we were so deliberate about the feeling that we wanted people to have. For example, I'll just give one example because it's the one that every single person that I called to ask for feedback brought up. So one of the things is, believe it or not, even though I'm a very public person here on the platform, I'm actually like a really, really shy networker. I don't like going up to people, pitching what I do. I don't, I'm really shy. I feel shame, when people talk to me for 3 minutes, then walk away. I feel like I wasn't interesting enough, as opposed to they're just, you know, bees and flying around flowers. Um, I don't feel good in conferences. And I remember saying to you guys, like, I don't want anybody to walk out of our event feeling like they were alone. And so, because we designed the Cosmic Conversations, what we did is we printed out 4 color postcards, each one of those postcards referring to one of the themes in the conversation. So, personal and professional, mutual knowledge. And when people were walking in, it was a bit of a game. We registered them, and then Maya and Daniela directed them to pick one of the postcards. And they said, just pick one. You'll find out why later. And then later, in between 2 sessions, when we had to re-mic people and there was going to be a bit of a disruption, was the ideal moment to be like, all right, now everybody lift your postcards and go find someone who has the same color postcard as you and ask them the question that's on the card and start a conversation. And every person has brought this up as the highlight, of our conference, because it was so intentional. It was like,
Yeah.
we don't want anybody sitting alone, staring into their phone, pretending someone sent them a WhatsApp. We want you guys to feel loved and connected. And in fact, just the fact that you and me picked the same color is already some place to start from. Like, we've already established something we have in common that doesn't require us to be like, hi, I'm Marilyn. I started a company in 2020. Like we could jump right into having a real human discussion. And that intentionality in designing those moments, I think, is really key. And that's what people remember. Like, they may forget that the audio was crap, but they'll remember that they had that moment of connection with a complete stranger in our conference. And so that's really, to answer that question of, we gave them many pieces of advice, but bouncing off of what you said, that intentionality in hosting, I think, is really important.
Yeah, for sure. And it definitely links back to that, like, your audience centric hat. I think, we love to be intentional about everything we do. It's something, we don't, even before we start a presentation, we are very clear about, what do we want to get out of this presentation? What is the desired outcome and who is our audience? And that also just means that, when you're intentional, you look ahead. So maybe tell us a little bit about what's in store next year, because we had a lot of people come to the 2022 edition. It'll be the 4th year running. I know we already got the ball started, but we set the bar higher and higher. So tell us what's going on in the Marilyn Cosmics, about what you have in store for next
So you're
year.
making me do this publicly, so I can't be like, maybe I was being too ambitious. Okay. Here's my ambition for next year, whether we, are able to realize it or not. I feel like more and more the online component needs to be a very special moment. Like, we can still produce a lot of content. And in fact, our vision is to take every session from the Cosmic Conference and reiterate it throughout the coming 12 months, republish it, talk about it, expand on it, like, to give it real, weight and importance. So it's not like the content dies, but in terms of synchronous stuff, I feel like we need to rethink what online looks like and how we bring people together online versus how we broadcast. Like, it's TV versus, I don't know, like audience participative theater. Like, I think we want to take both. Like, I feel like the Cosmic Conference was TV this year because we knew that there wouldn't be a lot of live people because of how it was structured. And so it's TV, and it's fine. People will watch it when they watch it.
It's on demand TV.
Pretty much. It's like the Netflix of conferences. But I like that, actually. Maybe let's keep that somewhere. We'll come back to it.
Good brand.
Yeah. However, I also now truly believe humans just return to their nature. We don't change just because there was a pandemic. We're going to go back to wanting to connect, to wanting to be together. But also, because we now experience so many things, we've become much more critical. Like, you will now go to an event and be like, it better be worth my time. You're not going to be like, oh, yes, another conference where I can go eat like cheese croissants and have a coffee and maybe learn 2 insights and then go home. No, if you're going to move, you're going to really need something to be exceptional. And so my pitch to you guys was, next year, I want to do more of an in-person experience with an online component. And I want it to be experiential, meaning I don't want people coming to a ballroom of a hotel, listening to people, me doing a keynote and somebody doing a panel. And no, I think people should come and experience with their bodies the future of work. What does that mean? Who knows? I also want us to do it together with other partners, which makes it even harder because then you have to control the messaging, the brand, the whatever. Like there's a lot more preparation. It's like a TED event, like you can't just let people come up and talk. You can't have different levels of energies between different speakers unless it's very intentional. And so that's my view, is that that's where events are going to go. It's kind of like how the office is becoming more inspired from the hospitality industry. I think event space are also going to take from the hospitality industry and become more and more experiential. And so that's what I want us to imagine for next year.
Love it. And I think one thing is we're not shy from a heavy brief. Our team revels in it. We love the challenge. It actually is what drives us. And so to think about what that might look like is always interesting. And I think, what we're really lucky for is a community that's really ready to get on board. We even had one of our attendees who came to the event was like, how can we work together? We were like, do you want to design our metaverse offices? He was like, sure, I'd love to, So that's to say we have a willing community, and it's something that makes that big hairy goal a little bit more achievable when you know that you have a team of people ready to help you succeed and get there. And of course, it's a good moment to put our values into place. We are disciplined. I think our kickoff is literally next week. And we wrapped up the conference 3 weeks ago. So that's to say that, we espouse our values in all that we do. This is really no exception. Kind of off the cuff, I just think it would be fun. Maybe we do a round of the rapid fires from the conference.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes. You want me to find? I mean, I got them
already. I'm all ready to go.
That was not fair. You didn't tell me to prepare. Usually our guests have
I know, but we can both do it. I also haven't prepared, so no worries.
Okay.
So I think the first one is great EX is
meaningful.
Mine's intentional. So I like that. The book every leader should read today is.
Look, I'm going to bring one up that I bring up a lot. And even though sometimes I find that I'm saying negative things before I say the positive. So High Output Management is the one that I'm going to recommend. I did earlier recommend Art of Gathering and The Power of Moments. You should still read those. But the reason I love High Output Management is because it's full of really down-to-earth, great advice about how to be a good manager.
Yeah.
Manager. And I always talk about the importance of management and middle management and how to companies can't get shit done if middle managers aren't amazing at what they do. And this book is just full of wholesome, down to earth, written by the ex-CEO of Intel. So it's not like no small reference. Sometimes gets a bit like, you know how Americans can be sometimes overly simplistic, or they repeat the same metaphor 6 times. And you're like, I get it. So sometimes gets there, but skip those. You can always skip a few pages, but full of great advice. And I just love one particular advice that he gives around how you lead from a place of values in times of uncertainty. And it's been something that I go back to a lot. So long answer, but what is yours?
Mine's The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. I read it a really long time ago. I think it's good actually for all levels of leadership. I don't want to say it's just for executives. Even if you're a middle manager, and it's important. It's not to say that you shouldn't have moments where you push your team and you shouldn't be direct with your feedback. It's not how to be a fluffy manager. It's just how to design a positive work experience so that everybody can come and deliver their best work. And perform. So it has that performance element. I like Shawn Achor. I like his approach to positive psychology. My answer.
Very cool.
Yeah. The ideal workplace is?
This I'm going to say intentional. I feel like a lot of times, myself having been an architect, and I remember how I used to draw plans. And in fact, that's why I quit architecture. I felt the load of responsibility of designing the frame of somebody else's life to be too big at the time. Now I'm like, bring it on. Let's change companies. but a lot of times we don't think about our space in very intentional ways anymore. We just like, it's whatever's around us, it's however it is, like a meeting room is a meeting room, whatever. And I think it's time for architects and thinkers and designers to reclaim bringing meaning into space. Like we could go into the history of architecture and the loss of meaning. We're not going to go there. But I think, yeah, being intentional about what it's for, the symbolic messages that it puts out, the space that it creates is very important.
I love that. We could dive into the debate of workplace and workspace and everything, but my answer is a little different. I think the ideal workplace is one where your employees like feel safe enough to come and deliver their best, whatever that looks like. You know, if you go back to the remote versus not remote debate, some people don't feel psychologically safe in their home, or some people feel like they have anxiety because they're working remotely, or whatever that might look like. You need to have a space safe enough that you can create value at each and every day without, feeling like if you took a risk, you would be reprimanded and lose your job as a result. That's what will, I think, in my mind, power.
And for workplace versus workspace discussions, do watch our episode or our session with Joe Santos. It's
actually watch any of the sessions with Joe Santos from the past few years. We touch on it in so many different ways. Coming soon, the Office in Place article. The secret ingredient to a great employee experience is?
I'm going to sound like Brene Brown. Vulnerability. Because I find that as a leader, the only way that I can help to create a really amazing employee experience, including for myself, by the way, because this, that's my pet peeve, that people don't think that leaders are included in this process, is to be open, to be vulnerable, to be open to both receiving and giving criticism and feedback, and to be like emotionally available. Because if you can't do all of those things, then everything else is just tactics.
Yeah, I agree. My answer would have to be that the secret ingredient to a great employee experience is, as inspired by what people said in the conference and your recent article, is listening to your employees. Like they're the secret ingredient. Listen to them, ask them. And in doing so, you don't have to deliver on everything they ask. Of course you can't, that's not possible. But by taking into consideration their wants and needs, you not only have them be part of the process, but you also have clear things, actionable things you can do to design an EX that delivers and that enables your teams to come and deliver every day. So yeah, I mean, I just thought it would be fun to kind of do a little bit around a rapid fire. This is like our official wrap up of the conference. Until
we do the strategy session,
deep dive. You guys want to see any of our guests come back? Let's do it. I mean, one thing we wanted to do in the spirit of Pits and Peaks that we didn't do is we didn't have a hardcore debate this year, and we love our debates.
Guys, if anyone's ready to debate me on something, just give us a call.
Yeah, or multiple. We can do it in a different way. We can have two teams if that's what we need to do. Like it's always fun. It changes it. And so yeah, I hope that we gave everybody like an honest look into what it took to put together the Cosmic Conference. We did the diary series. Consider this the final chapter of our Cosmic Diary for the conference. We could continue it for something else. I just want to say thank you to everybody who listened today and who tuned in and asked questions and came to the conference. It means so much to us. So much work goes on behind the scenes. If you do want to see all of our content, it lives on forever on our website. Please visit it. We'll drop the link. It's cosmiccenters.com. All the insights from all the speakers are there. And Marilyn, over to you to express your gratitude to our speakers, because I know it's something you say every day. We're like, man, we're just thank God for them. They came and they showed up and they delivered, and we're so appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. So just one last thing also, like there's a written version of this session of the Pits and Peaks on our website. So we'll also link that for people who prefer that format. But yes, I think you mentioned it earlier. I'll say it again. The one biggest peak, I think, of this conference and the way it ran and is actually our ability. Well, not our ability, how lucky we are to have this community and our ability to bring it together and to bring it to life. And when I say community, I mean everything from the centaurs to the speakers to the people who came to our physical event, to those who attended the online ones, to people who sent us feedback, to people who apologized to me personally by answering, saying like, I wish, we didn't talk about Connie, to Connie, who was like willing to do research with us for 6 months, to the 1,000 people who answered the survey, to, the 1,000 people who signed up to attend the conference. It's just when, it was beautiful to see, those 50, 60 people who showed up in the physical event together in a room. It was so emotional for all of us, by the way, for them too, because that's kind of the feedback I received. And so many of the things, like you think of Connie, you think of Mark, the work we've been doing together as an example, or Joe, like Augustine, I can think of so many people out of our speakers that for me personally, have been ongoing relationships for years now, many of whom I've never met in person, but both, we've all shown up for each other every month with new ideas, with energy, with encouragement, with whatever. And I think that's the community. Like they're not always in your face, but they show up at moments where you need them, and they give you inspiration, or they open doors, or they give you their time. And we did do something which we only talked about in our physical event, but we set up a wall of gratitude on our website. And we actually have the names of more than 350 individuals who are people who have contributed, to our organization and to our success story in ways that maybe they don't even remember. It might have just been an intro or a pat on the back or a word of encouragement. But we are forever grateful for them. And so I think we end on that, on feeling grateful for our community and promising that we'll do more and we'll do better by them. And thank you so much, everybody. Thanks you, Tools, for always, coming on here and riffing with me. And also so positively, riffing off of the book you're recommending, so positively showing up every day and making sure that everybody in the Cosmix is also just brimming with energy. And a great thanks to all the other centaurs as well. And with that, I will sign us out and see you guys soon.